I shot my uncle, right there, in front of my entire family, at my grandfather's funeral. The echo of that single gunshot still haunts me because I don't even remember pulling the trigger. All I remember is the look on his face, shock, fear, and something else, relief. And the last thing my grandfather ever said to me was, "If I die before I finish what I started, you must finish it for me." You want to know what that means? Trust me, by the end of this story you'll be speechless, because the last thing I discovered about my grandfather changed everything I believed about family, love, and revenge. And what I found in the end will leave you stunned. The cops said I looked calm when they took me in, but inside I was on fire. I could still smell the incense from the church, hear my mother screaming, see my father's trembling hands trying to stop the bleeding. And I remember thinking, how the hell did we end up here? They sat me in a small gray room at the station. One cop kept pacing. Another watched me through the glass. The young one asked, "Why'd you do it?" I told him the truth. Because of a promise, because of my grandpa. He thought I was crazy. Maybe I was, but I wasn't born a killer. I was born into a family that looked perfect on the outside. Sunday dinners, laughter, an old man telling stories about the good old days. But behind those smiles, something was rotting. There was a secret, a betrayal that split 3 generations apart. My grandpa was the kind of man people admired, tough, proud, respected, a war veteran. The kind of man who believed loyalty was everything. Until the day someone close to him, someone from his own blood, stabbed him in the back. After that, everything changed. He stopped going to church, stopped talking to most of the family. I was only a kid, but even then I saw it. His eyes carried war inside them. Not the kind from the battlefield, but the kind that eats you alive in silence. He once told me, "Revenge isn't about hate, boy. It's about setting the world straight." At that time, I didn't understand what he meant. I thought he was just bitter, just angry at the past. But years later, on his deathbed, he grabbed my hand with the strength of a man who refused to die with regret. His eyes burned like they did when he was young. "If I die before I finish what I started," he whispered, "you must finish it for me." I nodded. I didn't even know what I was agreeing to. I just wanted to make him proud. That was the moment everything began. The moment I stepped into a storm that had started long before I was born. And when I finally learned why he wanted revenge, when I uncovered the truth about who betrayed him, I realized I'd been fighting the wrong enemy all along. My grandfather came home from the war a hero, medals on his chest, fire in his eyes, and nothing left to lose. But heroes don't stay heroes for long. Not in this family. He trusted the wrong man. That man was his best friend, William Hayes, the one who fought beside him, drank with him, and promised to build a new life together after the war. They planned to buy land, start a lumber business, something honest. But when the deal came through, William forged the papers, took everything, and left my grandfather with a pile of worthless promises. It wasn't just money he stole my grandfather's pride, his home, his peace, his wife's smile. Grandma got sick not long after. Cancer, they said. But everyone knew it wasn't the sickness that killed her. It was heartbreak. And that was the first tragedy that tore our family apart. I remember my father once telling me, "Your grandpa died the day she did. The man who came after was a ghost with anger for blood." He was right. After Grandma's funeral, Grandpa stopped shaving, stopped smiling. He spent his days on the porch, staring at the hills that used to be his land. When anyone brought up William's name, his jaw would clench so tight you could hear his teeth grind. At the dinner table, the silence was heavy. My father avoided his eyes. My mother changed the subject. Nobody dared mention the past. I was only 10, but I felt it. The kind of silence that screams. Still, I loved him. He was this giant of a man who smelled like tobacco and gun oil, who taught me how to fish and tie knots. But sometimes I caught him looking at me with a strange sadness, as if he already knew I would inherit his unfinished war. One night, I found him sitting alone in the shed, candlelight flickering on his face. He didn't notice me at first. In front of him was a small wooden box, old and scarred. "Come here," he said. His voice was rough, but not unkind. He opened the box. Inside was a photo of two young men in uniform, him and William, arms around each other, smiling like brothers. Next to it lay a stack of yellowed documents, a silver lighter, and a gun. "This," he said, tapping the gun, "wasn't meant for the war. It's for what comes after." I froze. He looked straight into my eyes and said quietly, "When you're old enough, you'll understand." Then he closed the box, locked it, and handed me the key. I didn't sleep that night. I could hear him pacing the hallway, muttering names under his breath. One of them was William. The next morning, he was gone. No note, no goodbye. Just the echo of that night, the smell of smoke, and the locked box on my desk. My father told everyone he'd run away, that he'd finally lost his mind. But my mother, she cried like she knew something worse. For years, we heard nothing. No calls, no letters. Until one evening, when the sheriff came to our door with a blood-stained jacket. He said my grandfather had been found near the river, unconscious, bruised, half dead, but alive. When he came home months later, he wasn't the same. His hands shook. His eyes were colder. He didn't speak about where he'd been or what he'd done. But there was one thing different. He wore a gold ring that didn't belong to him. I asked about it once. He said, a reminder that debts get paid. From that day forward, nobody mentioned William Hayes again. It was like the whole town silently agreed to erase him. But I saw the way people looked at my grandpa when he passed by, half fear, half respect. And sometimes when I'd walk through the market with him, an old man would whisper, "That's the one who did it." Did what? Nobody would say. Years later, I found out the truth. William Hayes was dead, found shot in the chest in his truck by the river, same river where they'd found Grandpa. When I asked him directly, he just stared at me and said, "Some things, boy, are better left buried." But that night, I caught him scrubbing his hands in the sink long after everyone went to bed. The water ran red for a long time before it finally turned clear. That was the night I realized the war never ended for him. It just came home. And years later, when I saw the same blood on my own hands, I finally understood what he meant. I still remember the day my grandfather's revenge began, and the day our family began to die. He didn't kill anyone with a gun, he killed them with the truth. And the last thing he told me before it all fell apart was, "And the final thing, boy, will leave you speechless." He was right. It started with a single envelope, no return address. Inside were copies of old contracts, bank records, and letters, all proving that William Hayes, his old friend, had stolen not just land, but people's lives. Grandpa mailed those documents to every investor, every client, every newspaper in town. Within a month, Hayes lost everything. His business collapsed. His reputation was destroyed. And when his son, a young man who'd just taken over the company, realized the empire was built on lies, he drove his car into a tree. That's when it stopped being about justice. That's when revenge started eating through our bloodline like acid. My father snapped first. He stood in the middle of the living room, newspaper in hand, shaking with rage. "You happy now?" he yelled at Grandpa. "You got your justice. You killed his boy. Are you proud of that?" Grandpa didn't flinch. He just said, "That boy's father killed my wife. Don't talk to me about pride." The silence that followed was worse than any scream. From that night on, my father called him a murderer. He refused to let him in the house. My mother stopped talking altogether, like words had lost their meaning. But I, 17, reckless, desperate to believe in something, sided with Grandpa. "Dad," I shouted during one of those fights, "he's not a killer. He's just taking back what they stole from him." My father slammed his fist on the table so hard the dishes jumped. "No, son, he's killing people with hate, and soon he'll kill you too." I didn't listen. I thought my father was weak, afraid of the truth. But now, looking back, maybe he was the only one who understood how revenge poisons everything it touches. The night the family split was the last time we ever sat together. Grandpa packed his things in silence, his shadow stretching long across the hallway. Before he left, he turned to my father and said, "One day, you'll thank me for doing what you couldn't." Then he walked out into the rain, coat soaked, eyes burning. No one followed him. For years, we didn't see him. Until one morning, the phone rang. A neighbor found him lying alone in the old cabin by the river, barely alive. When we arrived, it was too late. He was gone. No tears came out, just a heavy, unbearable stillness. My father didn't speak during the funeral. He just stood there, staring at the coffin, jaw tight, eyes cold. And I stood behind him, my hands shaking, feeling the weight of everything unsaid between us. That night, after everyone left, I went back to the old house where Grandpa had lived. The air still smelled of smoke and dust. On his desk, there was a single envelope with my name on it. I opened it, expecting another apology, maybe a goodbye, but it wasn't that. It was a single piece of paper, written in his rough handwriting. "The traitor isn't dead. He lives inside your blood. Trust no one." I froze. My heart pounded so loud it drowned out the thunder outside. Who was he talking about? My father? My uncle? Or me? That night I realized something terrifying. Grandpa's war didn't end with him. It had only changed hands. And I was next. When the lawyer read my grandfather's will, everyone expected drama. We were wrong. He left no money, no land, no apologies. Just a small metal key and a note with coordinates scribbled in shaky handwriting. For him, the one who still believes in truth. And below that, the same words that had haunted me for months. "The traitor lives inside your blood." The room went silent. My father's face turned pale. My uncle smirked, as if it was all some sick joke. But I couldn't shake the feeling that the key meant something more. So I followed the coordinates. And what I found changed everything I thought I knew about my family. And the last thing I discovered there will absolutely leave you stunned. It took me hours to reach that place. An abandoned property deep in the woods, the kind of place people forget exists. The house was old, eaten by moss and silence. When I opened the door, the smell of dust and rusted metal hit me like a memory I didn't own. Under a loose floorboard, I found a hatch. The key fit perfectly. The stairs led down to a bunker, dark, cold, lined with boxes and old recording equipment. My flashlight flickered across shelves of labeled folders, haze, contracts, family, betrayal. My hands trembled as I opened the first file. It was filled with newspaper clippings, letters, and photographs. Grandpa had documented everything, every lie, every debt, every handshake that ruined him. Then I saw it. A photo of my father. He was young, standing next to William Hayes. They were shaking hands. In front of them, a signed contract. The date was clear. It was after Grandpa lost everything. My father had signed away the last piece of family land. He hadn't been a victim, he'd been part of it. My heart stopped. The room felt smaller, tighter, like the air itself was accusing me. Ka joy toi tin ong jien ro. Hua ra ong jung. I whispered it out loud, even though no one was there to hear me. Everything I'd believed about my father collapsed in that moment. I began to dig deeper. Old bank statements, hidden transactions, anonymous deposits. The same names kept reappearing. My father, my uncle, and one more man I didn't recognize. Piece by piece, the puzzle started to take shape. It wasn't just betrayal, it was a family conspiracy. That night, I drove home, shaking, unable to look my father in the eyes. He noticed. "Where were you?" he asked. "Somewhere you should have burned down years ago," I said. He didn't respond. He just turned away. That silence told me everything. But something still didn't add up. Why did Grandpa accuse a traitor still living in our bloodline, after my father's betrayal had already been exposed? I started tracking my uncle. He always stayed close to the family business, the money, the influence. The more I followed him, the darker things became. Offshore accounts, shell companies, quiet payoffs. Then, one night, I broke into his office. There, inside a locked drawer, I found it. An old cassette tape labeled "For My Sons." I played it on my phone. The voice that came through was Grandpa's, weak, trembling, angry. "If you're hearing this, it means you've both betrayed me. You sold me out for money. You made me bury your mother with shame. But only one of you pulled the trigger." Then a pause and a whisper. "The younger one." My blood ran cold. The younger brother was my uncle. He wasn't just part of the betrayal. He was the one who tried to kill Grandpa and made it look like an accident. As I turned off the recorder, I heard movement behind me. My uncle stood in the doorway, holding a gun. "Looking for something, kid?" he said. And in that moment I realized my grandfather's war wasn't over. It had just changed hands. I never thought I'd be capable of lying to my own family. But when you're born into a bloodline poisoned by secrets, deception becomes survival. I smiled at my uncle across the dinner table, pretending everything was fine, pretending I hadn't found the tape where my grandfather whispered his name. He laughed, poured me a drink, called me kiddo, and all I could think was, "You killed him." That night, I made myself a promise. If Grandpa's war didn't end, I'll be the one to finish it. And trust me, what happened next will make your blood run cold, and the final truth at the end of this will leave you completely stunned. The first step was to play their game. Family dinners, forced smiles, casual conversations that were really interrogations in disguise. I acted like I wanted to reconcile, like I was done digging into the past. My uncle bought it. My father wanted to believe it. Meanwhile, I started collecting everything. Emails, contracts, bank transfers. The deeper I went, the darker it became. Twist 1. My uncle wasn't just a traitor. He was laundering money through the family company. Money tied to a criminal ring that had been funding illegal land deals for decades. And the worst part? The transactions matched the timeline of my grandfather's accident. That meant one thing. The same people who helped steal his land were still paying to keep their secrets buried. And my uncle was at the center of it. I confronted my father one night. We were in the garage. He was fixing his truck, hands trembling slightly with age. I showed him a copy of the documents. "Did you know about this?" I asked. He didn't answer. He just sighed, set down his wrench, and said quietly, "You don't understand, son. Sometimes you protect family by staying silent." I stared at him, stunned. "You protected him?" I said. "The man who killed your father?" He didn't look at me. He just whispered, "If the truth comes out, we all burn." That's when I realized my father wasn't innocent. He wasn't guilty either. He was trapped in the middle, just like me. But unlike him, I wasn't going to stay quiet. Weeks passed. I built a case stronger than anything my grandfather ever had. Paper trails, audio recordings, hidden accounts. I sent anonymous tips to journalists. I planted evidence inside the company servers. I wanted the truth to explode so loudly it would shake the family name to ashes. But I needed one last thing: undeniable proof. So I broke into my uncle's office after midnight. The building was empty, just the hum of the air conditioning and the flicker of security lights. My hands shook as I cracked open the safe. Inside, there were documents and a flash drive. I plugged it into my laptop. A video loaded. The footage was grainy, taken from a hidden camera in my grandfather's old house. It showed my uncle arguing with him on the staircase. Grandpa shouting, "You ruined everything." My uncle shouting back, "You should have stayed dead after the war." Then, a push, a fall, a sickening crack. The camera shook. My uncle looked down at him, breathing heavily, then whispered, "I'm sorry, old man." He walked away, leaving him at the bottom of the stairs. Minutes later, he returned with gloves and bleach. He cleaned the railing, wiped the steps, moved the body. He made it look like an accident. I couldn't breathe. My hands went numb. I had just watched my family's darkest truth play out before my eyes. The next morning, I confronted him. He was sitting in his office, calm as ever, flipping through financial reports. I walked in and placed the flash drive on his desk. He glanced at it, then at me. "I know," I said. He leaned back in his chair, almost amused. "Know what?" I hit play. The video appeared on his monitor. His smirk faded. "You think this changes anything?" he said. "You don't understand, kid. Your grandfather was going to destroy us all. He was going to expose everything, even your father's part in it." I stared at him. He deserved justice. He laughed. "Justice? You sound just like him. That's the problem. Both of you think revenge is justice." He stood up, stepped closer, and whispered, "But all revenge does is make another killer." Then, faster than I expected, he reached for the drawer. The metallic click echoed in the room. He had a gun. "I don't want to hurt you," he said, "but you don't leave me a choice." I froze. For a moment, I saw fear in his eyes, not of me, but of the truth finally catching up to him. He raised the gun. I lunged forward, a flash, a deafening sound. When my vision cleared, he was on the ground, blood spreading beneath him like a shadow, the gun still in his hand. I stood there, shaking, unable to move. That single shot, the one that echoed through the church in the beginning, that was it. That was the moment I became the monster I swore I'd destroy. The police came minutes later. My father arrived soon after, face pale, hands trembling. He looked at me, then at my uncle's body. "What did you do?" he whispered. "I finished what Grandpa started," I said. He didn't reply. He just looked at me with the same sadness I once saw in Grandpa's eyes, the look of a man who'd lost everything. They arrested me. I didn't resist. As they led me out in handcuffs, I saw the flash of cameras, the swarm of reporters shouting questions. And all I could think was, Grandpa won, but we all lost. They say the truth sets you free. They never tell you it can also destroy you. I was sitting in that gray interrogation room, wrists bruised from the handcuffs, staring at the mirror that wasn't a mirror. The detective came in, calm, steady, carrying a file thick with papers and a small USB drive. He looked at me and said quietly, "You think you know what happened to your grandfather. You don't." He plugged in the drive. The screen flickered to life. And what I saw next will leave you absolutely stunned. The footage was old, grainy, black and white, time-stamped the night my grandfather died. The same night I thought my uncle pushed him down those stairs. But that's not what happened. In the video, Grandpa and my uncle were arguing, yes, but my uncle wasn't attacking. He was trying to calm him down. Grandpa's hand was shaking, clutching a revolver. His voice cracked through the static. "You betrayed me," he shouted. "You took everything." My uncle stepped forward, hands raised. "It wasn't me, I swear. Dad, stop." Then Grandpa staggered back. His foot slipped. He fell. My uncle lunged, tried to catch him, but it was too late. The gun hit the floor. The old man's head struck the stairs. The video ended there. I couldn't breathe. The room spun. The detective leaned forward. "Your grandfather faked the story, the documents, the evidence, all of it. He wanted you, your father, everyone, to carry his war, to keep it alive." My hands trembled. I whispered, "All my life, I fought for a lie." He nodded. He didn't mean to fall, but he meant for the hatred to survive. That sentence hit me harder than any bullet ever could. I destroyed my family, for a ghost, for a man who couldn't let go. I thought of my father, broken, my uncle, dead, my grandfather, rotting in the ground, still winning. I looked at my reflection in the glass and saw him staring back at me. Same eyes, same rage, same curse. I whispered, his revenge didn't die with him, it just changed names. And that's when I realized the real tragedy wasn't that my grandfather fell, it was that I took his place. They called it self-defense. That word slid over me like clean water over a stain that would never lift. And the final thing in this story will leave you stunned. They uncuffed me, handed back my jacket, and watched as I walked out into a world I had already broken. The courthouse lights blurred. Cameras snapped. My name hung in the air like smoke. I was free on paper, but everything inside me felt heavier than any cell. I went straight to the old house. The place smelled of ash and memory. The roof had collapsed in one corner. The porch sagged. Inside, the hearth was a black crater. I moved through the rooms like a ghost, looking for a face it once loved. On the desk, half buried in soot, lay a charred notebook, my grandfather's handwriting running across browned pages. I brushed the ash away and read the last line aloud, voice breaking. "Hate never dies unless someone decides to end it." The sentence hit like a verdict. For years, we thought revenge would fix what was broken. It didn't. It multiplied the wounds. I dug a shallow hole behind the broken shed. The gun felt cold in my hands. I thought of my grandfather's promises, my father's silence, my uncle's smirk, and the look on the boy's face in the church when everything collapsed. I lowered the weapon into the earth and covered it with soil until the world reclaimed it. Standing there, I realized the choice wasn't between justice and revenge at all. It was about stopping the cycle. It was about deciding whether one more life would be consumed by the same hunger. So I buried more than metal that day. I buried the urge to finish what someone else started. To you, watching. My grandfather sought revenge to reclaim honor. I sought it to claim justice. In the end, we both lost the same thing, family. A child kicked a ball near the grave as dusk fell. He laughed, bright and careless. For the first time in a long time, I let myself hope the next generation might not learn our lesson the hard way.